The possibility of two major reunions is suddenly on the table for Pittsburgh. And if you're a Steelers fan who remembers what this defense used to look like at its peak, this conversation is going to hit home immediately. According to ESPN's Brooke Pryor, there are two names to keep an eye on as we approach free agency: Minka Fitzpatrick and Javon Hargrave. And the circumstances surrounding both situations are very different, which makes this even more intriguing. Let's start with Minka Fitzpatrick. He's currently under contract for one more season with the Miami Dolphins. But because of a regime shift there, a trade or release isn't being ruled out. Minka is 29 years old, still in his prime, and coming off a strong season in Miami, where he operated primarily as a big nickel defender. For Steelers fans, you don't need a reminder of what he meant to this franchise. He was a three-time first-team All-Pro in Pittsburgh, a centerpiece of the secondary, and one of the most respected voices in that locker room. Now here's where the financial reality kicks in. If Miami keeps him, he carries an $18.8 million cap hit next season. If they cut him before June 1st, they only save around $6 million, with about $13 million in dead cap. If they designate him as a post-June 1st cut, they could save roughly $15.6 million while carrying just $3.2 million in dead money. On paper, that sounds like an easy decision, but teams only get to post-June 1st designations, and in Miami's case, bigger savings could come from other veterans like Tua Tagovailoa or Bradley Chubb. That makes a Minkah release far less likely than fans might hope. The more realistic path, a trade, Miami could shop him. They could even hold on to him into the season and explore a deadline deal. But an outright release appears to be the least likely scenario based strictly on cap math. And then there's the Steelers side of it. They're already investing heavily at safety with Jalen Ramsey and Deshaun Elliott. Adding Minkah back into the fold would create a fascinating three-safety package, especially if defensive concepts lean heavily into big nickel looks. But would Pittsburgh want to commit major money to a third safety? Spotrac projects a potential 3-year deal north of $19 million per season. That's not cheap. Even if that projection isn't exact, Minkah isn't signing a bargain contract, so the question becomes, does the front office prioritize that kind of splash move, or do they look for value and draft development instead? Now let's shift to Javon Hargrave. This one feels more realistic in terms of availability. The Minnesota Vikings are expected to release him before the new league year if they can't find a trade partner. Hargrave, originally drafted by Pittsburgh in 2016, built a strong career after leaving solid years in Philadelphia and San Francisco before spending 2025 in Minnesota. But here's the debate. Hargrave is 35 years old. He's still disruptive as a pass rusher, but his profile has shifted. He's no longer the type of anchor-in-the-middle nose tackle that this defense arguably needs. Last season in Minnesota, he wasn't even lining up primarily at nose. He played more four-eye technique. The Steelers' run defense has struggled in recent years, and what they truly lack is a true run stuffer, someone who can eat double teams and hold the line of scrimmage. Hargrave, at this stage, is more penetrator than anchor. So even if the reunion story feels nostalgic, the fit has to make sense schematically. If Pittsburgh wants to fix the core issue in the run game, they may be better served targeting a traditional nose tackle in free agency or the draft, rather than bringing back a familiar name who fills a different role. Then there's the situation at left guard. Multiple insiders are signaling that Isaac Seumalo could hit the open market. If he leaves, Pittsburgh likely nets a 2027 compensatory pick, but that creates an immediate need. Seumalo has been the veteran presence on a very young offensive line. Letting him walk means deciding between promoting Spencer Anderson, signing another veteran, or drafting a guard early. Jerry Dulac has reported that the Steelers plan to sign a guard in free agency regardless. Names near the top of the market include Elijah Vera Tucker and Zion Johnson, but they'll command significant money. A more practical route might be bringing Seumalo back at a projected 2-year or $14 million per year range, maintaining continuity and stability. And then there's the backfield, with reports that Aaron Jones could be released by Minnesota and Kenneth Gainwell's future uncertain. Jones becomes an interesting value option. He's coming off a down year, possibly due to overuse, but as a third down specialist and receiving back, he still brings skill and veteran savvy. On a vet minimum deal, that's low risk. Pair him with Jaylen Warren and allow a younger back like Caleb Johnson to continue developing. That's a strategic approach. Finally, safety Jimmy Ward is expected to hit the market after being released by Houston. At 35 and coming off a major foot injury, he's projected around $1.4 million. Experienced, respected, but undeniably a risk. So when you step back and look at the full picture, this offseason could feature reunion talks, tough financial decisions, and strategic depth signings. The Steelers have flexibility, but every move has ripple effects. If you had to prioritize just one of these reunion scenarios, Minka Fitzpatrick or Javon Hargrave, which one makes more sense for Pittsburgh right now? And why? When you really break it down, the emotional pull of a Minka Fitzpatrick reunion is powerful, but roster building can't be emotional. It has to be calculated. If Minkah somehow hits the open market, the Steelers would absolutely evaluate it. A 29-year-old safety, three-time first-team All-Pro during his time in Pittsburgh, still playing at a high level, is not something you ignore. The respect he had inside that locker room was real. Coaches trusted him. Teammates leaned on him. He was the communicator on the back end, the tone setter in critical moments. But here's where the conversation gets real for 2026. Pittsburgh already has Jalen Ramsey and Deshaun Elliott under significant financial commitments. If you add Minkah at something even close to $18 to $19 million per year, you're talking about a massive allocation of cap space to one positional group. That only works if the defense is going to revolve around three safety packages as a foundational identity, not just a situational wrinkle. If the vision under the current coaching structure is to lean heavily into big nickel, disguise coverages, and blur the line between safety and slot defender, then Minkah makes schematic sense. But if the priority is reinforcing the trenches and stabilizing the offensive line, that money may be better spent elsewhere, and we can't ignore the human element. Would Minkah want to return? He was close with Mike Tomlin. The organizational structure has shifted. The circumstances that led to his departure still matter. Even if the Steelers are interested, the feeling has to be mutual. These are the dynamics fans don't always see, but they absolutely influence free agency outcomes. Now, pivot back to Javon Hargrave. The nostalgia is there. Third-round pick in 2016, developed in Pittsburgh, productive interior disruptor, but roster needs evolve. The Steelers' biggest defensive issue over the past couple of seasons hasn't been interior pass rush. It's been run defense consistency. Hargrave, at this stage, isn't the classic space-seeding nose tackle who anchors against double teams. He's a penetrator. He thrives when attacking gaps. That's valuable, but if the main objective is restoring physical dominance up the middle, you may need a different archetype entirely. This is where the front office has to be disciplined. Familiar names generate headlines, but the right fit generates wins. The left guard situation may quietly be the most pivotal storyline of all. Isaac Seumalo has provided stability to a young line. If he walks, you're not just replacing a starter, you're replacing experience, communication, and chemistry. Spencer Anderson is a logical in-house option, but if you elevate him permanently, you lose his versatility elsewhere. Signing a veteran guard keeps the draft flexible. Drafting a guard early injects youth, but adds growing pains. Every path has trade-offs. Then, there's the running back depth. Aaron Jones at a vet minimum, that's a calculated gamble with upside. He wouldn't need to carry a full workload. He'd provide receiving ability, veteran leadership, and insurance. If it doesn't work, the financial hit is minimal. If it does, you get a productive rotational piece without compromising cap flexibility. And let's not overlook the safety depth conversation beyond Minkah. Jimmy Ward represents experience at a low cost, but at 35 and coming off injury, that's a high variance move. If you're in win now mode, you might justify it. If you're balancing present and future, you may lean younger through the draft. This offseason feels like a crossroads moment. The Steelers can chase splash reunions and recognizable names, or they can quietly reinforce foundational weaknesses: run defense, offensive line depth, and affordable complementary pieces. Sometimes, the smartest move is the one that doesn't trend on social media. So now it comes down to you. Should Pittsburgh push aggressively for a Minka Fitzpatrick reunion if the door cracks open, or should they stay disciplined and focus resources on the trenches and long-term roster balance? And if you had control of this offseason, which direction would you commit to right now? And if we keep following this thread, the real question isn't just about bringing back familiar names, it's about identity. What kind of team are the Pittsburgh Steelers trying to be in 2026? If the vision is to maximize the secondary, disguise coverage, and create confusion for opposing quarterbacks, then adding another high-Q safety like Minka Fitzpatrick would instantly elevate that ceiling. You'd have flexibility pre-snap, you'd have leadership on the back end, you'd have someone who understands what playing in Pittsburgh means. But again, that only works if the structure around him supports it financially and schematically. Because here's the truth: championships are usually built from the inside out. And right now, the most pressing issues on this roster don't sit 15 yards off the ball. They sit at the line of scrimmage. Run defense has been inconsistent. Short yardage situations have been a problem. Late game physicality hasn't always been there. That's not solved by a splashy safety signing. That's solved by adding mass, leverage, and discipline in the trenches. Whether that's through a true nose tackle acquisition in free agency or a high upside draft pick that might quietly be the most important move of the entire offseason. The offensive line conversation fits into that same philosophy. If Isaac Seumalo leaves, you're talking about replacing a stabilizer, a veteran who knew protections, a player player who had chemistry with the center and tackle next to him, continuity matters on the offensive line more than almost any other position group. If you let him walk, you better have a clear plan, whether that's promoting Spencer Anderson or bringing in another experienced guard who can step in immediately without a long adjustment period. And don't underestimate how these decisions connect to the quarterback situation and the overall offensive rhythm. A stable interior line supports the run game. A reliable run game reduces pressure on the quarterback. A balanced offense keeps your defense fresh. Everything ties together. That's why the Aaron Jones possibility is interesting, not because he's a superstar at this stage, but because he fills a defined role. As a receiving back and rotational piece, he complements Jaylen Warren rather than competes with him for touches. On a vet minimum, that's efficient roster building. Low risk, defined role, immediate utility. Now zoom out for a second. Free agency often tempts teams into chasing names instead of needs. Fans love reunions. Headlines love recognizable veterans, but the Steelers historically have been at their best when they stay disciplined, when they address weaknesses methodically rather than emotionally. So as this offseason unfolds, every rumor has to be filtered through one lens. Does this move strengthen the foundation of the team, or does it simply create buzz? If Minkah becomes available at the right number, and the scheme truly maximizes three safeties, you explore it. If Hargrave can be added at a value price in a clearly defined rotational role, you consider it. But if those moves prevent you from fixing the run defense or solidifying the offensive line, then discipline has to win. This is where front offices earn their reputation. Not in splash moves, but in restraint. And now I want to hear from you again, because this is the kind of offseason where opinions will be strong. If you had to choose between investing heavily in a secondary reunion or allocating that same money toward rebuilding dominance in the trenches, which path gives Pittsburgh the better chance to contend? Because the reality is, this offseason isn't about one move, it's about alignment. Every decision has to point in the same direction. If the Steelers decide they're truly in win-now mode, then short-term veteran additions like Aaron Jones or even a low-cost flyer on a player like Jimmy Ward make sense. Those are complementary pieces. They don't define your roster, they support it. They give you depth, they give you insurance, they raise the floor without crippling your flexibility. But the core of this team still has to be built around physical control up front. And that's where the conversation keeps circling back to the trenches. You can run creative coverages, you can stack defensive backs, you can rotate safeties, but if opposing offenses are moving you off the ball in December and January, none of that matters. That's why the nose tackle discussion is bigger than it sounds. That position doesn't generate headlines. It doesn't trend. But when you have a true anchor in the middle, someone who absorbs double teams and keeps linebackers clean, the entire defense plays faster. Edge rushers get better angles. Linebackers hit gaps with confidence. Safeties aren't forced into extra run support as often. It's a domino effect. The same principle applies offensively. If the left guard position becomes unstable, you feel it everywhere. Protection breakdowns up the middle, collapse pockets, the